Hi, how are you?
Doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing great as well. Thank you so much for coming today. And before we get started, I would like to remind one more time to our people that are watching us right now that you can ask your questions live on Kent. I think that we will start with some more general questions and then we will focus a little bit to React. What do you think?
That sounds great. I'm excited to hear what the questions are.
Perfect. Let's get started. So, the first question that I have for you is: how do you stay productive while juggling open source, teaching, and family?
Yeah, this is a question that I actually get a lot. So, for people who don't know, I'm married and have 5 kids. We are expecting our sixth in November. So that is very exciting. And yeah, it's very busy. So, for added context, my wife is a full-time mom. She takes care of most things around the house, and I help when I'm not working, of course. But yeah, we feel pretty evenly burdened, but it is a lot. And my wife being full time on house stuff helps a lot with that. So, like, don't think that I'm doing like this single parenting thing. I don't know how people manage that. That's the true incredible thing that they can manage that at all. So yeah, as far as balancing all of that, and also juggling open source and teaching, like most of my teaching is open source, and so there's a lot of overlap in the things that I do. And then I'm also very public in the things that I do. So I guess I'm just trying to like downplay the perception that I'm this really, really productive person. I do feel like I'm quite productive, but I don't think it's as much as people sometimes think. So anyway, some specific tips and things. I um, I'm pretty intentional about my time, and I try to focus on things that are going to make a meaningful impact on a lot of people. And so that means that rather than tinkering with my editor or something, if I do end up tinkering with my editor, that's going to turn into some content or something. And so I try to take advantage of the things that we naturally do as developers and turn those things into content. So yeah, I built a pretty cool website, but then I did that so that I could teach people how I did that. And so then Epic Web comes as like, let me show you how I built my website sort of thing. So there's a lot of double dipping going on. And I'd say that's probably one of the bigger things that I would recommend to people is just find the things that you're already doing and see how you can magnify the impact of that thing that you're doing. So when I was working full time for somebody, now I'm full time on my own, and I'm full time educator. But when I worked at PayPal doing product work as well as my own stuff on the site in the evenings, I would find ways that I could take the things that I'm learning or the things that I'm doing on the job and magnify the impact. And so, for example, if I learned how to write CSS in some way, or some special CSS property I'd never heard of before, I would write a blog post about that. And so pretty soon after you do that once a week for a couple of years, you have over 200 blog posts. And so
Yeah.
you just look for those opportunities to take the things you're already doing, and just with a little bit more effort, you can turn that into something that is even more valuable than it was already.
I absolutely agree with what you said. First of all, congrats on the sixth kid. I wasn't aware of that. But for for everything else that you mentioned about productivity and creating content, I'm also a big advocate of all those ways that you mentioned. And if anyone's from our audience is looking for something similar, I think this is a great advice.
Hmm. Thank you.
Um, we also have some more questions. So, what's your most controversial tech opinion?
Ooh, this is kind of an interesting one because sometimes my controversial opinions have shifted in such a way that they're no longer controversial. So, like when I
Oh,
created testing library, back then everybody was using Enzyme with React and testing state and calling calling internal methods and different things like that. And my controversial opinion back then was don't test implementation details, and those are implementation details. We should not be doing that. And there was a lot of pushback on that until eventually, it was just everybody now accepts that as, of course you don't do that. Like, why would we do it any other way? And so I think my most recent relatively controversial opinion could be around AI and what my vision for the future is. I think there are a lot of people who are really hyped about AI, and maybe they have done significant work in this space or have researched enough to have the opinions that they do, and some people don't. I feel like I have, so to answer the question, my most controversial opinion right now is that the web browser is going to either go away or evolve into an AI assistant client like ChatGPT or Claude Desktop. And the websites will be MCP servers. So that is something I'm actually betting really heavily on with creating Epic AI.pro. The .dev was taken, so I couldn't take it, the Epic AI dev, but I got Epic AI Pro. And so on there, I'm going to be teaching people how to make the websites of the future, which I believe are MCP servers. There's a long way to go to get there, but I see a really, really good chance for all of us to have our own Jarvis in our pocket, if for those familiar with Iron Man. And I do think that the web browser will either evolve into or be dissolved into something more akin to ChatGPT or Claude Desktop. And I know a lot of people listening to that, like, this is why it's controversial, right? A lot of people are like, no, that doesn't make any sense. Kent, you're way wrong. You bought into the hype. But I have been very thoughtful about this. And if you are curious about my take on this or like going into this deeper, then I have a 45-minute talk on Epic AI Pro where I lay out what my vision for the future is and why I think that this is a real possibility. And why I'm willing to go 100% bet on this. So feel free to go to Epic AI Pro and learn all about it.
Absolutely. And also, if you want, you can share that in the comments, or maybe you can share it later to social media so people can check it out as well. So that was very interesting. But yeah, let's move on to the next question. And maybe if people that heard of this right now for the very first time, maybe later they can ask more related questions. Our next one is, what's something you believed early in your career that you now disagree with?
Ooh, that is such a good question. And it's really hard to answer. Something I believe, actually, I feel like somebody asked me a similar question recently. I think probably, this doesn't quite answer the question, but it gets to the heart of it. Something that I did really early on in open source was I just went like all in as much as I could. Somebody would post an issue and I would solve it in 5 minutes. And I would just I was just turned on all the time on open source stuff. And it's exciting. There's a lot of it's a rush to know that there are people using your software and oh my goodness, they need me. And, I've got to, solve these problems for them. And that was, it's not advisable. That's just like a path to burnout. And I don't know that I'd say that I ever actually burnt out on anything. But like, I guess I burnt out on projects, but I don't know that I would classify that as burnout, just like moved on from different projects. But I got pretty close. And there were some times where I lost track of the things that matter more, like my relationships with my family and stuff. I'd spend more time doing this free open source stuff that should have been spent with my family. And my advice now is to contribute to open source as much as you want to or need to for your job. So if somebody posts an issue on your project, if you don't need that issue to be solved yourself, then you don't have to respond at all. And I mean, I appreciate that people should be good stewards of projects and stuff. And it can be really annoying if you're contributing to a project and nobody's responding. but you really don't owe anybody anything in open source. And if you really are like kind of done with a project, then and you're no longer using it, then look for somebody else to take it over. But yeah, if you don't need something, then you don't have to do it. And if you're not finding joy in that project anymore, like people can fork it. Like
Yeah.
that's it. That's what open source is all about. So anyway, that is probably something I thought early on. I felt like I was much more key to or well, I was pretty key to a project's success, being my own project, but I overemphasized how important that was in my life. So that's what I was wrong about.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that. And I would like to add that burnout is a real thing. A lot of people may have that and maybe they don't even recognize it. So if someone again in the audience feel that they are going to be burned out, maybe they could just take a break, take a step back, focus maybe on their relationships or something else, and then go back to open source, their project, or whatever else makes them happy.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Let's move on. What's the weirdest thing you've done outside of coding?
Oh, nerdiest thing. Okay, I am a really big fan of Brandon Sanderson. He's an author. He actually lives like just a couple miles away from me, but
Oh,
he's the biggest fantasy author in the world, I think. Maybe people would argue George Martin or something, but yeah, Brandon Sanderson. He's got the two biggest Kickstarters ever. He's like huge. He's massive. So people who you're like, who's Brandon Sanderson? He's a massive name in the fantasy world, and he is just fantastic stories. So yeah, really into Brandon Sanderson. I listen to books. I don't read books. I fall asleep if I read books. But I've got a bunch of his books anyway, like his physical books on my bookshelf behind me, and a bunch over here as well. And I have a like a bunch of plushy things. And in fact, that plushie right there is also from a Brandon Center. That's a chol for anybody who's
wow.
familiar. And yeah, I've got a bunch of plushies of the Spren from Stormlight Archive, for those who know what those are. One for each order. I also have a banner for each order of Knights Radiant from the Stormlight Archive in my basement. I am, yeah, very much a Brandon Sanderson nerd. That is probably the most nerdy thing that I have done outside of coding.
Well, I can already see some people in the comments agreeing with you. Let's move on to some more React specific questions. What React feature are you most excited about in the next 2 years?
Yeah, you know what? React Router still in the main release releases does not have stable support for React server components. And so I know that that's like 2 years in the past for a lot of people, but for the majority of React developers, that's not something we've been able to use at all. And so I believe I have seen the React Router team will have support for this very soon. And so I'm very much looking forward to that. Then the React compiler has a release candidate out now, and that is very exciting. I honestly wasn't sure we'd ever get there with that actually being production ready, but here we are with the release candidate. I'm cautiously optimistic about that. Mostly optimistic. I think that if it didn't work, then they probably wouldn't release it, and a lot of people have tried it and found it to work well. So yeah, that is exciting. Yeah, as far as other things coming to React, I to be honest, in the last couple of weeks, I've just turned so heavily toward AI related stuff that I don't know anymore. I like I've just been outside of the React context for a couple of weeks, and now like, what is going on in React anymore? So yeah, those are probably the biggest ones. I do think that React server components um, are there's React Router is going to treat React server components the way that I think they should be treated. And people who have had bad experiences with RSCs are going to be pleasantly surprised with how good RSCs are with React Router. So that's what I'm really looking forward to.
Amazing. And thank you for sharing that one as well with us. Is there any favorite React structure pattern you always follow?
Oh, well, composition would probably be the one if we're talking about structure. So composition is the thing that like was React's thing since the very beginning, being able to create a component that accepts other components and can render those or accept elements, React elements, and render those and lay them out on the page. This is a pattern that I teach in my advanced React patterns workshop on epicreact.dev. And that honestly, it's kind of baked into the way that nested routing works with React Router and Nexjs, and because it's just such a like pivotal part of everything. With RSCs and with server actions and things, I think actually we're taking that composition even further, where now you can compose bits of the server into bits of the client and vice versa. And it's really, really interesting what we're able to do with that. So yeah, I would say composition is definitely my favorite pattern, and followed closely by compound components as like the thing that really took off. Once we got hooks and no longer needed render props and things, then like compound components were like, yeah, okay, this is a really good idea. So those two are probably my favorite.
Awesome. And we have another question from the audience. A very insightful take on the future of web dev, Ken. Do you envision progressive web apps being as relevant in the upcoming years?
Yeah, that is a good question. If my vision for the future plays out and browsers turn into AI clients or Jarvis, and websites turn into MCPs, I do think that UI still has a place in there, because it's easier to press a start and stop button on a stopwatch than it is to say start and say stop to an AI assistant or type it out, right? So like UI still does have relevance there. And I think that PWAs is a lot more than just offline, but that's what lots of people understand it to be. Is just like, this app works offline. Um, and I think that in the future, LLMs will run natively on the user's device. They'll be like slimmed down, really pretty much. There won't be a lot of training data on them. Like they won't just know the answer to millions of questions. I think they'll just be language models. They'll just understand what you mean by certain things, and then be able to call into tools to get additional context and stuff. And in that context, I do think that having MCPs that run locally on the device will be really relevant. And I kind of see that as being the evolution of what a PWA is. So yeah, PWAs as they stand today, I just, in my vision for the future, I don't really see them being there. Like I just can't imagine a scenario where having like a UI where first you open this menu, then you click this link, and then you click on that link, then you enter this form field, and then you hit submit, and that's how you change your username or whatever. I don't see how that is better than just like telling your assistant, hey, change my username on this platform. Like it's just so much easier for the user. Onboarding is just not a thing, all of that. So it's a better user experience, and it's likely to happen in my what I expect for the future. And in that world, I just don't see PWAs being a thing. That said, who knows what the future is going to be? Who knows how quickly that's going to happen? So if you're in the middle of learning about PWAs, and or your boss told you need to make a PWA for your app, then go ahead and do that. But I would definitely keep a close eye on the evolution of user interaction, because I think it is happening.
Thank you so much for this. What are your thoughts about React Compiler? Do you recommend it for automatic memorization of complex apps?
So for the apps that most people build, they actually don't even need to apply the performance optimizations that React has already that you use manually. There are plenty of apps that do, for sure, but like a regular CRUD app does not need those optimizations, especially if you're using a framework that has performance optimizations kind of out of the box, that you don't have to opt into. And I stand by what I have always said about that. Like, the performance optimization is adding complexity to your code base. And so you have to make sure that you measure before and after to verify that you actually did make things better, rather than just sometimes performance optimizations can actually make things worse. So you do want to measure. Now, the React compiler is different because it is, and I've not used it, so I could be wrong in this, but it's my understanding that like it doesn't actually make your code base any more complex, and in fact, it makes it easier to understand and follow. Now, I guess I'm gonna step back a little bit and say, like, technically there is some complexity here because you could write code that only works if the compiler is enabled, because now it's including all these dependencies in this array, and now those are objects, and so it's going to happen every time. And like the semantics kind of do change as far as I understand it, and that's one thing that I'm worried about with the compiler, is that you will write React code that only works with the compiler, and I'm not a huge fan of that. I'd rather have the compiler be like minification, where it works with or without it, but you can optimize things with it. So unfortunately, I don't think that's entirely the case with the compiler, and I think people are going to have to include it, and their code just won't work without it. That said, we are pretty used to writing code that doesn't run natively in the browser already with JSX anyway, so maybe that's fine. So like this is why I'm kind of cautiously optimistic about this. I think that in a year, the vast majority of apps will probably, like new apps, will start with the React compiler, and a lot of people will be moving over to adding support for it. And it's my, as far as I understand, it's actually really easy to set up. It's not like a hard thing to do at all. So I expect a lot of people will just be using it, and in fact, in a year, a lot of people will be using it and not even realizing that there was any other way to do it. So yeah, I would say my take on the React compiler is that everybody will be doing it just by default.
Thank you for this well-thought answer. I'm sure that the person who asked this question wasn't expecting this answer, so thank you very much for this. And how would you approach front-end unit testing if you had to learn it from scratch? Is Jest still relevant in 2025?
Yeah, so if I had to learn it from scratch, I would learn it the way that I teach on testingjavascript.com, which is like, let's build our own JavaScript framework. And actually, Artem is who the creator of MSW, is recreating testingjavascript.com on Epic Web right now. And so he just released the most recent workshop, which is testing React applications. And so that is, yeah, it takes up one of the modules that was in testing JavaScript. So he's got like 4 or 5 modules now on Epic Web that you can all get that as a bundle. And it is basically testing JavaScript v2. And so, yeah, on testing JavaScript, the last update I made to that was like, I think 2021. The principles are all still very relevant. I don't, yeah, there's nothing that I teach in there that I'm like, ooh, yeah, I'm teaching people to do something wrong. But the tools that I teach on there are pretty dated now. And so, no, I would not be using Jest anymore. I think, of course, it's still relevant. People still use it. And if you've got a really big test suite that would be hard to move over to vtest, then like keep it. It's better than not having it. And it's not like it suddenly got worse when vtest showed up. But relative to vtest, I think Jest is not as good. So I would be using vtest. That's what Artem is teaching. And so his first workshop teaches you how to build vtest, basically. So the same sort of thing that I do on testing JavaScript. And then I would also use Playwright instead of Cypress. Playwright is phenomenal. Actually, to take it even further, I would not use JS DOM anymore either. So no more running your tests in a simulated DOM environment. You run them in a real browser. And vtest has browser mode that allows you to run with VTest and all the cool VTest features, but it actually evaluates in an actual browser. So you can do all sorts of things that we never could do in JSDOM, like computation layout, or like layout computation and stuff like that, which is very, very good. And also I believe your tests will run faster, because JSDOM, if anybody ever had experience with testing libraries, find by queries, like find by role, that query is really slow in JSDOM. It's actually fast in the browser, but JSDOM has a really hard time with that query. And so if you switch over to VTest and use browser mode, then your tests will probably speed up, which is very exciting also. So yeah, I would recommend go check out Artem's testing stuff, epicweb.dev/testing. And that is how I would, if I had to learn it from scratch, that's how I would learn it.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing these resources with us. Another person is asking regarding LLMs, do you think the front end will use LLMs provided by browser APIs or interface with external services like OpenAI, or rely on an internal LLM from the backend?
Great question. So my answer to this is probably not what you're expecting, because it's none of those. I don't think that front ends will be using LLMs, not in the way that you're thinking. So in my vision for the future, there will be a handful of players in the actual LLM space for like the user interaction portion. Like there will be backend services that are using AI and LLMs to do like the backend stuff, but you're talking about the front end. So I'm talking about user interaction. There are a handful of browsers. There's Chromium and Safari, and what else? Firefox, and like maybe a couple others. There's this new one that somebody made that's like they made it from scratch. So like there are a handful. You can name them all on one hand, maybe two. And I think that is the future for user interaction. The clients for LLMs. There will be a handful of those that people use. You can call them Jarvis if you want to, or the computer from Star Trek. But there's not really a reason for every app to have its own wrapper of an LLM with its own chat interface. The real reason I think that is the case is because users don't want to chat to your assistant. They want to chat with their assistant who can do things on your site, because their assistant has all the context about them and their preferences and like everything. That it can also talk to other services for them that they've already authorized. A lot more power in having just this one LLM that they are using on a regular basis, or not the LLM, but the wrapper for that. So I think like ChatGPT and Claude Desktop. And so I think that there will be those. I do think that there's still room for kind of bespoke applications. I'm not sure whether Cursor or VS Code or something will be like just slurped up into this one overarching Jarvis-like app experience, maybe. But there, in the interim, there absolutely will be some like very specific application use cases. But in my experience, even that is kind of annoying to have to say, okay, I've got ChatGPT, which is like managing all of my like more personal things, but even like some technical stuff over there. And then I'm in Cursor, and that's where I'm actually editing code. And I would actually prefer those to just be one. And it has all the context. And so maybe it's like kind of a multimodal sort of thing. But in any case, I do not think that users want to chat with your website's chat interface. What they would rather do is chat with their existing assistant and have that assistant be able to do things on your website. And that is what MCP, or Model Context Protocol, is all about.
That was very interesting as well. Thank you. So another person is asking, how do you see the shift to Next.js? Could it take over React in future?
I don't think so. React Router is still a lot more widely used than Next.js is. I do think that Next.js, like if we're talking about market share, I guess, Next.js has increased its market share. But now that React Router has added as many features as it has, in particular supporting React Server Components, where a lot of people want to use RSCs, I just don't see like a major takeover. Both of these players will still be
Yes.
relevant into the future. I don't see any of the other React-based frameworks really making too much of a big space for themselves there. TanStack probably has the best chance at that, but even that I think will be pretty niche. Not because it's not good. Of course it's very good, but because it's not different enough from what people already know. And so, yeah, I don't see Nexjs just taking over in the future.
Mhm. The next person is saying, "Hey Ken, can you give tips for newbie React dev moving from vanilla JavaScript?"
Yeah, well, if you're moving from vanilla JavaScript, I'm actually impressed. A lot of people don't even start there anymore. So a lot of people just
True.
start with React. So that's cool. Yeah, so probably the best advice that I can give you, that's a little bit self-serving, I know, but this is really what I would suggest is epicreact.dev has a free tutorial that takes you through the first 4 exercises of the first workshop of that series. And so you can go through all of that, and that will get you on a really good foundation. Anybody who has learned React from me in the last, let's see, I released Epic React V1 in 2020. So it's been almost 5 years, has gone through. And actually, even before that, I released a very similar course on Egghead called The Beginner's Guide to React way back in like 2016. So anybody who's learned from me about React over the last almost decade has learned in this way, where we start without React. We start with vanilla JS, and then we slowly add in React. And just it's not very long, but it's a really great way to onboard yourself to understanding the fundamentals of what React is, what it's doing for you, and all of that. So I would recommend go to epicreact.dev, look at the tutorials, and the first tutorial. Getting started with React is what you want to get started with.
Perfect. What's your opinion on Angular versus React? I guess this is also a little bit of classic questions, and you get that a lot probably.
Yeah, I've done Angular a long time ago. I worked with I think I moved over to React at the end of 2015. And so yeah, my time with Angular is very dated. But one of the big things that I really liked about moving to React was how much JavaScript I was doing. Rather than
Mhm.
in Angular, I was still writing JavaScript, but a lot of the stuff that I was doing with my UI was in a template, and debugging that template was really hard. And like learning the syntax for all of that was like very specific to Angular. I couldn't really use it anywhere else, which some people aren't really bothered by, but it really bothered me that I couldn't take that knowledge anywhere else. So I really appreciate that React is a thin layer on top of JavaScript. Now with the compiler, is it that anymore? I don't know. But yeah, I think I prefer the React mental model of being just JavaScript. It feels less magic to
Yeah,
me. So I prefer
yeah.
React.
If you have any Angular experts today with us, maybe they can leave a comment and share their opinions as well. We have another question. What is the current state and future of WebAssembly?
I honestly, I don't see WebAssembly going any further than it is already, which is not to say that it's not going anywhere. Like or it's not, it doesn't have a future. What I mean is, it has done some really amazing things. But yeah, when WebAssembly first came onto the scene, a lot of people were like, "Oh, this is the end of JavaScript. Who would write JavaScript voluntarily? Now we don't have to. What a beautiful day this is!" And I knew from that moment, I was like, "There's no way you're going to get somebody writing Python or writing Ruby or whatever. I don't even know. Do those compile to WebAssembly? I'm not very into that world, but you're not going to get somebody doing that and interacting with the DOM. And there is a framework. I just had a conversation with somebody about this in Athens a couple weeks ago. There's a framework for that's WebAssembly based for building UIs for .NET. and or at least C#, I guess. And somebody was coming to me, talking with me about it, asking me about it, and I asked them about it, like, what do you think? And they said it's really, really hard. It's rough. But it's very much the sort of thing that a person who doesn't want to write JavaScript and just prefers writing their .NET stuff and wants to do a little bit of UI stuff, it's the sort of thing that they would want to use. And so, like, I don't really see a future for WebAssembly for UIs on the web, if the web continues the way that it is in the future anyway. But I do see a lot of value in WebAssembly for things like what Stack Blitz is doing. That is crazy impressive, way cool. Figma also uses WebAssembly a lot for the stuff that it does, which is also very cool. So there are areas where WebAssembly makes a ton of sense. But there's some fundamental issues with WebAssembly that prevent it from being like a full front-end application solution.
Amazing. And just a small parenthesis, since you mentioned Athens, I would love to be on that conference, but unfortunately, I don't live in Athens. I live in another city in Greece. Maybe next year you could come to Thessaloniki, which is the city that I live, and you could have it up here. I know the organizers, they are doing the same conference in Athens, Thessaloniki, and in some other places. So it will be a pleasure to have you here as well.
I love it there.
Yeah, I know, but I don't want to take much of your time with my things. So I will move on to the next question. If AI agents can now write most of our components and tests, will the future React engineer focus more on orchestrating patterns and business logic than UI composition?
Well, so in my vision of the future, I keep referring to this, but like a lot of these questions are future facing. So here you are. The way that I see the future playing out is that React developers, we're probably not going to be writing a lot of React. Instead, what we'll do is we'll write tools that for AI assistants to use to interact with our systems, whatever it is that we do. Maybe we're writing agents, and so we're exposing tools to use these agents, or maybe we're just doing regular CRUD stuff, and like we've always been doing, and now those tools expose things for manipulating those. But I think in this future there will still be UI, but what's most likely to happen is we will expose some components that are like branded to us, or maybe not components, but like UI tokens. So like our colors and maybe logo and stuff, so that the LLM can then piece those things together to generate the UI that the user needs for whatever task they're trying to complete. And that's about as far as it will go as far as like UI development is concerned. Who knows how long this will take and if it will happen at all, but I do expect that is the better user experience at least. And I don't see the reason that I'm so bullish on this is because I don't see any technical limitations to it, and it is a better user experience. And there are, of course, like other factors at play with stuff like this where, yeah, just because it's technically better doesn't mean it's going to win. There are a lot of examples in history where that has been the case. But I think that there's also a lot of money to be made. And that's typically what ends up winning out, is like the big players see a money opportunity, and so they put money investment into it. So I see a lot of things pointing to this future. And so I think the UI developer of today is going to be building model context protocol servers. And then the backend engineer of today is going to be building agent-to-agent communication related stuff, and still working with databases. And I think that the current state of AI assisted programming that we're doing right now will continue. I don't really think that that is going to get miles and miles better than it is now. That's definitely possible as well. Like nobody's going to tell the future, but this is I'm basing my decisions on this perceived future. And of course, I hedge my bets and stuff, and I would still say, like, we don't know if this does happen. We don't know when it's going to happen. So it's still valuable to uh, to learn. Like some people talk about, well, the end of the world is coming any day now, so why do I even bother painting the picket fence, in my front yard? Or why do I make my bed? Like, I say, like, paint the fence, make your bed, eat your vegetables, all of that stuff, because nobody really knows. And the version of you who does things in a prepared way is probably happier than the version of you who doesn't. So I would say, like, you're probably working on a React app or some other front end app right now. Continue to do that. Just keep an eye on this space and make sure that you're ready to pivot if you feel like it's pretty inevitable.
Absolutely. I love that. Well, we have a lot more questions, so I will go to the next one. In your
Oh,
dev
I
work,
can be pretty long-winded too, so I'll try to be a little more terse with my answers.
no, it's okay. However you prefer. Personally, I love your answers. You're very specific. You're giving us your resources. You're giving us your insights. So personally, I love them, but I don't know because the people are asking too much. So maybe somewhere in the middle.
That sounds great.
Perfect. How are you making sure Cursor or Windsurf or Try is up to date with latest versions of Angular or React?
Great question. So this actually, the answer is MCP, Model Context Protocol. So Cursor and Windsurf. I don't know about Tray. I've actually never heard of Tray. That's the first time I've seen this. But yeah, Cursor and Windsurf both support MCP, and there are MCP servers for getting the latest version of libraries, the documentation and examples and stuff like that. So I would say, yeah, take a look at MCP servers for that. The one that I'm using is called Context 7.
Amazing. Next one is how to learn about front-end system design.
I don't know. When you say front end system design, like are we talking about like the visual design, or are we talking about the system of like the architectural? And here's the thing. So if we're talking about design, then the only resource I could give you is Front End Masters. It has some really good design related courses. If we're talking about architecture, that one is a really hard one to teach because you have to get really, really specific and opinionated on how you put together an application. And that's what I did with Epic Web. And that I feel like that architecture is really good. So if you want to go through Epic Web, it's a really big course. There's a lot of stuff in there, but it has to be very opinionated. So it's basically, here's how Kent builds applications. If you want to build the way apps the way Kent builds them, here's how you do it. And even if you don't end up building apps that exact same way with those exact same tools, there's a lot that you can learn from that. But the problem with architectural lessons is that there's just so much that you can, like so many different options, and there's so many different trade-offs. And so nobody makes much content about this because it's hard to find something that's generally applicable to a lot of people.
Yeah. What would you suggest on how to deal with the JavaScript fatigue and the ever-evolving React ecosystem?
I think that it's okay to stick with what worked yesterday. You don't have to always be using the latest thing. For a lot, like there are, I remember years ago, a tool called Greenkeeper came out, and we have this Dependabot thing now. But Greenkeeper, it would just keep your dependencies up to date. So it would make pull requests for you anytime there was some breaking change in a library or something like that. So I turned that on originally, and then I turned it off. And like the goal here is like we want to stay on top of the latest stuff. But I found that there were projects that I was kind of done with them, and they worked. I didn't really need to like do a whole lot with them. And so instead I moved to like, I don't upgrade unless I need to upgrade. And sometimes that means you have like a pretty painful upgrade because, you've let all these different dependencies languish. But the alternative is you try to upgrade and you find out, oh, well, this dependency hasn't been updated yet. So I just spend an hour trying to upgrade and I can't because I need that dependency to be updated. And so like it's really annoying and kind of painful to be upgrading all the time. So when I was at PayPal, I pretty much just would, like, every other week I would check on dependencies and update a couple of them, and then, oh, this is a pretty big one, I'll save that for another time and maybe make some specific sprint planning time for that. So yeah, that's what I would suggest is like stay on top of it in general, but you don't have to be like using the latest of everything all the time.
Yeah, I would agree with this one as well. Another person is asking, what do you think about Bun and Bun Test Runner?
Ooh, so I am very excited and about it. I think it's really awesome. As an instructor, I don't really want to use the more niche tools, and as much excitement as there is around Bun on X and other platforms, it just the reality is it's just not widely deployed by a lot of people. And so as an educator, I want to use the thing that people are actually using, and that is Node.js. So and even NPM. I know that a lot of people use PNPM and they think NPM is garbage. It's not. It's like there are things PNPM does that are awesome, but NPM is actually fine. And so yeah, I would say Bun is super cool. I'm very excited about it. I'm mostly interested in seeing when it gets full node compatibility. But yeah, I haven't personally started using it actively in anything that I do. But I'm very excited and encouraged about it.
Perfect. Another person is asking, what is your take on Web3? Why did everyone stop talking about it?
Yeah, good question. Somebody is at my door. I will go and tell them to wait, just because I know we've
Yes.
got another like 5 minutes, but
Yes, yes,
I
yes,
need
yes.
them to not leave. So I'll be right
Of
back.
course.
I do have an answer for this.
Perfect. Okay. And as we're waiting for Kent to come back, I would like to remind you folks to use the hashtag FanReactDay, Fan as Front End Nation, and tag us on social media. We are on Twitter, on X, and Blue Sky, and on LinkedIn or Facebook. You can also find Front End Nation if you don't remember the hashtag, but we will be there and we will be checking every message that you're sending to us. And also, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them right now in the chat. Again, our people are there and they are answering your questions. We have a few more minutes with Kent. Okay, and he's back. So let's go back to the question about Web3.
Great. Sorry about that.
Okay.
So yeah, I think that Web3. So there have been hype trains about things all the time, and a lot of people think that AI and MCP is just kind of another replay of all this stuff. Sorry, I just ran up the stairs, and so I'm out of breath.
Yeah, that's totally okay.
So I never really got into Web3, and the reason is the user experience wasn't any better. So like even though the like technical aspects of it and like content ownership and all of that was better, it didn't actually make any better user experience.
Mhm.
Most users don't care about centralized databases and centralized information or whatever. Like the vast majority of users don't know or care about any of that stuff. And so I think that's probably a big reason why Web3 has just kind of disappeared. And the other thing about that is like a lot of people who are on Web3 were just trying to jump onto the bandwagon, and they didn't really understand the technology or whatever, but somebody had sold them on a future, and they were like, well, I've got to jump on this future, but they didn't quite like get it. And there's just like a lot of hype around it. And then they all jumped over to AI when AI started
Yeah.
getting exciting. And so now you do still have people who are building actual useful things with Web3 technologies and the blockchain and stuff. But they lost all of their hype people because they all went over to AI. And that's not to say that people who were into Web3 and now are into AI are necessarily just like selling snake oil and don't know what they're talking about or anything. I'm not saying that. I do think that there are a lot of people who do fall into that category. But yeah, Web3 was an interesting time for all of us. And I think AI is different in that it is already providing a better user experience. It's just so much better to be able to have a conversation with a computer than to like click around a bunch of buttons and like, you know, wordsmith your Google query just right so you can find the article that somewhere has the answer to your question. Instead, just like use natural language and get a natural language response back.
Yeah.
That user experience is already so much better. So AI, like some people think AI is a bubble or something. Yeah, maybe it's a little inflated, possibly. I don't know, but it's already returning massive value for people. And so that is the big difference. Web3 just never really demonstrated that value and that improved user experience.
Yeah. So let's go through one last question because we will be soon out of time. What will React Native be used for along with MCPs when building native apps instead of web apps? Will native apps be ever needed anymore?
I don't know. If my vision for the future plays out, then no, I don't think that there will be a need for something like that. Now, like it's possible that things go even further than I think. Right now, I think that the browser will evolve into these AI assistants, and ChatGPT will kind of become what people use instead of a browser and that sort of thing. And so then on a mobile device, we are still using iOS and Android. And so there are those native platforms. It could go further, and actually now it's the operating system is the AI assistant. And if that happens, then do we need iOS and Android, or is it just like a very lightweight, operating system, like lightweight Linux distro or something like that that runs natively on these platforms? It's hard to say, but I do think that there will definitely be UI components that need to be rendered, like those host applications that are wrapping the LLM and managing that communication between us and the LLM. They do need to have components of some kind. Some sort of UI needs to be there, and they're going to generate UI as well. So they're going to need to be able to take different pieces. And so on a native device, is that going to be React Native components potentially? Maybe. It's hard to say. I really don't want to leave people with the impression, though, that I think that the future of React is doom and like that there's no future there. I do think that there is a lot of potential, and React has proven to be able to pivot and evolve to be what the modern web needs. And so, yeah, we'll see. I think if you're learning React Native, keep learning React Native. Just keep doing it. You will find a job, and it's great. And it's a lot of fun. So yeah, just look forward to the future and keep an eye on it, how things are.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for this, Kent. That was our last question. Unfortunately, we couldn't go through all of the questions that we had from our attendees, but I would suggest to people to also follow you on social media. I know that you are quite active and maybe they can ask a few more questions there. Thank you very much for being with us today and looking forward to hearing more from you on future conferences.
Thank you so much. I'm very pleased to be a part of this. Good luck on the rest of the event. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. See you. Bye.
Bye.